In solo leveling, after the news that South Korea's 10th S-rank hunter being revealed spread across the entire country, the president of Eugen Construction went on to say that the association released an official statement regarding my glorious king, stating that he was a mage-type S-rank, asking his son Jinho if he was able to recruit him. But he looked down, telling his father he was sorry since he wasn't able to convince him. But Drippy-woo told him that he was going to form his own guild and asked him to join as the vice master if he was interested. The president smiled, asking Jin-Ho if he knew why he wanted to create the Eugen Guild. He responded asking if it was because the hunting business was profitable, but he replied saying he already had enough money to last him many lifetimes, so he wouldn't risk getting into feuds with major guilds just to make a few more bucks. This made Jin-Ho ask why, making the president respond saying that it was in order to protect themselves. Hunters were growing stronger by the day, and it was no longer surprising to come across a hunter whose strength rivals the combined forces of a country. These individuals are known as national-level hunters. They surpass the S ranks and are considered the most powerful hunters in the world. And in some smaller countries, these hunters reign like kings, so they couldn't keep relying on their legal system and the government to protect them. He wanted to create a guild so that he could recruit trustworthy hunters they could truly depend on, and not just because he just wanted to make money or connections. And it seemed like he had already found one. And as he put his cup on the table, he told him that he had his approval. He would let him be the leader of the Eugen Guild, telling him to build and expand the guild to gather strong hunters that he could trust, making them his allies. And in the future, those hunters would be the most valuable assets he owned. Jin-Ho responded thanking him, but he couldn't accept his offer, saying that he was going to join Drippy-woo's guild instead. Dozens of nosy-ass reporters stood in front of Drippy-woo, making him question why they weren't taking pictures of the clown Min-sung. Some reporter then asked him if he was really the E-rank who was a part of the association, asking how he felt after reawakening since it wasn't something that happened every day. But Baek Yoon-ho told Drizzy-woo that dealing with them would just drain him, telling him to please follow him since he would take him home. But he suddenly disappeared in an instant, stepping right outside of the parking lot, saying he was good as he was pulling up his hood. This made the reporters look dumb as fuck, questioning what just happened. Choi Jong-in in the back smiled, saying he was a mage-type hunter, but he also had excellent athletic abilities. But Yoon-ho didn't reply as he was in complete shock, thinking he was fast. So fast that his eyes couldn't keep up. He already knew he was strong, but this wasn't just a matter of strength. The way he moved, plus the fact he could feel how intense his mana levels were when they met in front of the evaluation room. He's become much more stronger since the last time he saw him. He was now 100% sure that Sung Dripwoo was more powerful than they were. But it was weird since his reawakening must have happened a while back, so it didn't make sense how he became stronger. But perhaps it wasn't a reawakening, questioning if he could be a hunter who could continue to level up. After my glorious king appeared on the news, the dumbass that got beat by Big Papa Sung questioned what he was still doing alive, saying he couldn't stand him calling him words even I wouldn't dare to say. An appraiser was shockingly surprised, saying he's seen a lot of artifacts in his time, but he's never come across a red crystal ball. He couldn't believe it, but the magic orb actually had an amplification rate of 100%, thinking to himself that even the most renowned craftsmen were only capable of making artifacts with an amplification rate of 50%, saying that Mr. Choi Jong-in would be eager to pay a pretty penny for it. The appraiser then asked Drippy-woo where he got the item. He responded saying he found it in a dungeon, making him question if there were really artifacts of this caliber just lying around. He then asked if he would like them to put the item up for auction, saying they would help him sell it at a premium price. But Drippy-woo responded saying he would think about it, thinking that he needed to clear the demon's castle as soon as possible in order to craft the holy water of life, meaning he needed an artifact to protect himself from the flames inside the castle. He went on to tell the appraiser that he was looking to buy an artifact that could protect him against fire, but seeing him confused made Drippy-woo ask if an artifact like that was hard to find. He responded saying not at all, and in fact it was one of the most common artifacts on the market. This made Drippy-woo ask why he couldn't find any of them online, making the appraiser say that artifacts with such attributes were rather expensive, so they weren't usually put up for sale on the internet. Drippy-woo thought it made sense since Mr. Song Cheol and Choi Jong-in both use fire magic, as well as Tusk and his shadow mages. They then arrived at a room filled with luxurious-looking armor, as the appraiser asked if there was anything he liked. Drippy Woo responded, asking if a thin sheet of glass was strong enough to protect the artifacts. There didn't even seem to be any other security measures. The appraiser responded, saying the glass was imbued with mana, and it was actually strong enough to withstand a full-on attack by an A rank. But seeing that he wasn't convinced, the appraiser told him he could go ahead and try and crack the glass if he didn't believe him. He was willing to offer him the artifacts inside if he managed to break it. Drippy Woo thought to himself that even if the glass was imbued with mana, it couldn't possibly be that sturdy. He suddenly began locking in as he charged up an ultimate attack. But the appraiser hurriedly stopped him, saying he wasn't being serious, since if the glass actually broke, the elite members of the Hunters Guild would come running down because the auction committee had co-signed a security agreement with them. The appraiser questioned where his confidence was coming from, since he said he was a mage-type hunter. Drippy Woo then asked if he had any weapons he could try, preferably a dagger. He responded saying of course they did, and as the weapons specialist told him to follow him, the appraiser turned back to see a slight crack on the encasing's glass. And while sweating his balls off, he said that he didn't even touch the glass, so there was no way that what he was thinking was even possible. Drippy Woo, holding a dagger, asked the weapons specialist how much it was worth. He responded saying that that one was 30 million, making him think that it was just of B-rank rarity and it was weaker than Night Killer, yet it was still expensive, saying that at best it was probably around the level of Kasaka's Venom Fang. Drippy Woo then pulled out his own dagger, asking how much he thought it was worth. And as he held it in his hand, he was in surprise, saying he could tell it was made by a master craftsman. But Drippy Woo nervously thought to himself that it was just an item from the shop. He was suddenly shocked after hearing the specialist say that it was worth more than 100 million at the very least, making him think he bought it at the shop for only 2.8 million gold. Kim Sang-shik's steel sword was worth 3 million, even though it only had an attack damage of 10. And Jin-Ho's armor and equipment costed millions, even though he didn't get much use out of them. So if an item from the shop could fetch for such an insane price, there was no reason for him to sell the Orb of Avarice after all. At the White Tiger Guild, Yoon-ho can be seen contemplating if it was even possible, a hunter who could continuously level up. When he's in his enlightened state, he can accurately read his opponent's skill level, so he's absolutely positive that Drippy Woo was weaker than him when he met him at the Red Gate. But that wasn't the case anymore, saying it was foolish of him asking why someone as strong as him would ever join someone else's guild when he could just start his own. It didn't matter whether a certain guild was the best or second best in the country, since if he could continue growing stronger, he would always be number one. So it looked like he and Choi Jong-un were just wasting their time. News of my glorious king undergoing a second awakening, going up 5 entire ranks, played on the TV, as the White Tiger Division chief with fire in his eyes said he hasn't given up on recruiting Drippy Woo, saying he was positive they could convince him to join if they tried once more. But another staff member asked if he really thought he would be willing to meet them here when there were reporters everywhere, making Chief An say that they would just have to set up camp. Gina, looking annoyed, told Drippy Woo that the reporters were still outside the building, until the deputy division chief suddenly spotted her up in the house, making her duck as quickly as possible, fearing somebody saw her. He asked Gina if she wanted him to go down there to tell them off, but she responded telling him not to do anything since he was already receiving a ton of hate comments on the internet, so there was no need to add fuel to the fire. This made Drippy Woo ask what he ever did to deserve hate, making Gina respond, telling him to remember that he snubbed the reporters after he reawakened. She didn't care about the people outside, so neither should he. But someone suddenly began knocking on the door, scaring the shit out of Gina, making Drippy Woo say that he had enough and would give them a piece of his mind. And as he was opening the door, telling them to cut it out, Jin-Ho can be seen sobbing, saying that his father kicked him out of the house, making Drippy Woo look mad confused. He then said that he thought he had his own place, making Jin-Ho reply saying the apartment he was living in was bought under his father's name. The door suddenly began to close as he asked if it would be alright if he crashed at his place for a while. Gina then asked if it was someone he knew, but Drizzy Woo replied saying he's never seen him before in his life. Jin-Ho then started frantically knocking on the door, begging him to let him in. The panel then switched over to Jin-Ho's mom, asking if he wasn't being a little too harsh on their son today. But the president responded saying he wasn't harsh enough. If he truly wanted to make something of himself, he should have paved his own path, but instead he decided to work for someone else. But something suddenly felt wrong, saying it was strange. His wife responded asking what was wrong, as he replied saying that he was seeing 2 of her. suddenly falling to the floor. The panel switched over to Drippy Woo opening the door to Gina's room, saying that someone might try to talk to her while he's gone. He then summoned his shadows, saying that one of the soldiers should be enough to fend off an A rank, but he looked behind, questioning why there were only 3 of them here when Tusk had 4 guards. But he remembered that he wasn't able to make the 4th one into a shadow because he splattered him into the ceiling. He told 2 of them to go back inside, telling the 3rd one to guard his sister, and he would let him keep the other 2 as backup. The soldier then dispersed into her shadow, making Drippy Woo say that he should up the security of the entire neighborhood while he's at it, summoning a dozen of his basic rank shadows, saying that from now on they would be the neighborhood watch group, telling them to be careful to not be seen by anyone while making their rounds. He then commanded them to go on and patrol the area. Even if an unaliver were to appear, they wouldn't be able to win against his shadows unless they're a high-ranking hunter, so this would be his small contribution to society. The next day arose as Drippy Woo asked Jin-Ho if he slept okay last night. He responded saying he did, telling him that motels these days had great facilities. He then said it was good, telling him to stay there until he found an office space for their guild, thinking to himself that he didn't think he'd actually turn down the guild master position from his father, but he turned it down for him so he couldn't say anything bad. Drizzy Woo quickly slid the van's door open, telling Jin-Ho he would be back, disappearing in an instant as the system stated that he entered the demon's castle. In solo leveling, after finally entering the demon's castle for the 2nd time, my glorious king stated that from this point forward, the difficulty of the dungeon would increase exponentially, which is why he came prepared. The items he purchased from the auction house would protect him from the combustive flames. He bought a wind robe and a nameless ring imbued with water attributes, so he was now all set to begin. A system message appeared informing him that he received a quest, making Drippy Woo question, "Again?" The quest named Collect the Demon Souls 2 told him that the Demon King Baran resided at the top of the tower, telling him to defeat him and collect his soul, with the rewards being a top-tier runestone plus 30 bonus stats and a 3rd undisclosed reward. Drippy Woo said that the rewards were actually better than last time, seeing as how the runestone granted him the job-specific skill Shadow Exchange, Shadow Extraction, Shadow Preservation, and Monarch's Domain. He's acquired 3 job-specific skills so far, and each one has been remarkable, so he was looking forward to this next one. A teleportation array appeared before him as the system stated that floors 1 through 76 were open, and asked which floor he would like to access. He responded with the number 76, and after stepping into the array, he arrived at the floor containing an insurmountable amount of demonic beings. Holding the Orb of Avarice, my boy Tusk was about to lock in, activating Hymn of Rage, Hymn of Strength, and Hymn of Giants. Both monsters looked like kaijus about to have an all-out battle. Tusk then started charging up his ultimate attack over the matter of seconds, suddenly releasing it in an instant, completely obliterating everything in front of him with immeasurable power. Nothing could have survived that. The system then stated that he had defeated 2 top-ranking demons, along with 2 demon lords, gaining him a total of 7,800 experience points. Yes, I used a calculator. My aura farming king said that it was incredible. Even though he has the Orb of Avarice, he still must have been nerfed when he became one of his shadows. And since the Avarice's power corresponds to the strength of the beholder, he would let Tusk use it for the time being. With the scene ending with the system showing Sung Drip Woo's current status info. At an emergency center, Jin-Ho's dad asked how long has he been there. The doctor responded saying he's been asleep for 2 days now, making the president say that he must have been quite exhausted, asking if there was something wrong with his body. The doctor replied, asking if he had been in close contact with a hunter or an awakened recently, making the president question why he was asking him that all of a sudden. That is, until the doctor went on to ask if he had ever heard of the eternal slumber before. Patients who are diagnosed with eternal slumber cannot regain consciousness, but it didn't simply mean that they were unable to wake up, since while asleep the patient's life force is quickly drained, and the only way to keep them alive is to use a life support device that runs on mana. This disease began to appear shortly after the appearance of Gates, and has unalived many who could not afford life support. The doctor went on to explain that patients diagnosed with eternal slumber experience constant drowsiness and later fail to wake up from their sleep. This made Jin-Ho's father ask what that had anything to do with hunters. He replied saying that mana had a deep correlation with eternal slumber, and a certain amount of people were naturally predisposed to be mana intolerant. The symptoms of eternal slumber develop when these type of people are exposed to mana over a long period of time. So he must be careful of essence stones, mana crystals, and individuals who have been endowed with mana. And judging from the sudden development of his symptoms, there must have been some kind of trigger, making the doctor ask if there was a hunter in his family. The president thought back to his discussion with Jin-Ho, thinking that with each passing day, more and more practical uses of mana are being discovered, and the number of awakened beings are continuing to grow as well. While gripping his sheets, he thought to himself that in a world like this, people who are mana intolerant were just. I've become a victim of natural selection, he stated. But realizing what he just said made him question if he, the great Yoo Jin-Ho, had really become a victim. But he would never lose, and he hasn't lost yet. Meanwhile, on an island off the coast of Japan, a monster stepped out of the water as a living ant had successfully landed on the shore. A pair of hunters walked alongside the road as the guy on the right said that nothing could beat the peace and quiet. A villager then thanked Mr. Nagawa for keeping the neighborhood safe and asked who was the guy next to him, questioning if he was a newcomer. The hunter confirmed it, asking him to welcome him. Nagawa then told the new guy that it may not seem important, but he needed to be sure to make his rounds and become acquainted with the townspeople. Because if a gate opens up on a remote island like theirs, they're doomed. Because if they take too long to find the gate, a dungeon break might occur which would wipe their entire town. Explaining that they had to locate the gate as quickly as possible using the mana meter and contact the hunters outside of the island for help. It would take 3 days for reinforcements to arrive, meaning they must locate it within 3 days of its appearance. Even though he was a D rank and the new guy was an E rank, they were still the only hunters in the town, so they had to be responsible. But the new guy suddenly noticed something in the middle of his yap session, telling Nagawa to look over there. As a strange silhouette approached, the D rank questioned if that was a person, asking, "Who goes there? Let me know if you guys think these two survive."